Good evening. A political battle that has spanned months in Texas reached a critical juncture overnight. In a late session vote, the Republican-controlled state Senate gave its final approval to a new congressional map, a map that will define the state's political landscape for the next decade. This vote marks the end of a contentious and dramatic legislative process, one that saw Democratic lawmakers flee the state in an attempt to block the Republican agenda. But while the fight in the legislature, maybe over the battle over these new district lines, is now poised to move into the courtroom. The new map was drawn following the results of the 2020 census, which showed Texas experiencing a massive population boom. The state gained nearly 4 million new residents, more than any other state in the nation, granting it 2 new seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. The controversy lies in who those new residents are and how the new map represents them. Demographic data shows that 95% of Texas's population growth over the past decade came from communities of color, primarily Hispanic and Black Texans. However, the map passed by the Republican majority does not create new majority-minority districts. In fact, it does the opposite. The plan shores up the party's incumbents by drawing bizarrely shaped districts that snake through communities to pull in more Republican voters, while packing Democratic voters into a smaller number of districts. This process is known as packing and cracking. One of the new congressional seats has been drawn in the Houston area and is designed to be a safe Republican seat. The other new seat near Austin is also drawn to favor a Republican candidate. Furthermore, the map reduces the number of districts where Latino voters make up a majority of eligible voters from 8 to 7. It also dismantles a racially diverse and competitive district in the Houston suburbs, currently held by a Democrat, turning it into a solidly Republican district. Republicans who champion the map defend their work. They argue that the maps are fair, legal, and drawn blind to race. They state their goal was to follow the law, create compact districts where possible, and reflect the political will of a state that has consistently elected Republicans to statewide office. They insist that the districts were drawn based on voting patterns, not on the race of the people who live there. They claim the process was transparent, with numerous public hearings held across the state. Democrats and civil rights groups paint a very different picture. They call this a textbook case of gerrymandering, a blatant attempt to dilute the voting power of minority communities that were the sole engine of the state's growth. They argue that the map intentionally discriminates against voters of color, violating the Federal Voting Rights Act. This final vote did not come easily. It followed months of political maneuvering that drew national attention. Earlier this summer, during a special legislative session, dozens of Democratic members of the Texas House broke quorum by flying to Washington, D.C. They stayed there for weeks, successfully killing a restrictive voting bill and delaying other Republican priorities. Their goal was twofold: to prevent the state legislature from functioning and to lobby U.S. senators in Washington to pass federal voting rights protections, which they argued were necessary to combat efforts in states like Texas. Eventually, enough Democrats returned to Austin, allowing the legislative session to proceed. That set the stage for this final debate and the overnight passage of the new congressional maps. The bill passed the Senate along party lines after a lengthy debate where Democrats offered numerous amendments, all of which were voted down by the Republican majority. They argued that the map was an insult to the millions of Texans who fueled the state's economic and population growth, only to see their political voice diminished. So what happens next? The map now heads to the desk of Governor Greg Abbott, who is expected to sign it into law without delay. But that signature will not be the final word. Legal challenges are already being prepared. Groups like the American Civil Liberties Union and the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Educational Fund have promised to see the state in court. They will argue that the map illegally robs minority communities of their right to elect representatives of their choice. These lawsuits could take months or even years to resolve, and the outcome is far from certain. The legal fight will be complicated by a Supreme Court decision from 2013 that weakened the Voting Rights Act, removing a requirement for states with a history of discrimination like Texas to get federal approval before changing their election laws. This battle in Texas is a microcosm of a larger fight happening across the country. As states redraw their political lines based on the new census data, the outcomes will be crucial in determining which party controls the U.S. House of Representatives after the 2022 midterm elections. For now, the legislative odyssey in Austin is complete. A new political landscape for Texas is now drawn in ink, but its future will almost certainly be decided in the courtroom. The outcome will not only shape the state's representation for the next 10 years, but could also play a pivotal role in determining the balance of power in Washington. It is a story of power demographics and the very definition of fair representation in a changing America.